Hello Linux fans. Today we're going to talk about the graphical user interface and the desktop environment within Linux. Exactly the purpose of this video is I am going to demonstrate that the graphical user interface and indeed the desktop environment in Linux is simply an application that you run within Linux. It's not like in Windows where it's an integral part of the operating system itself and it is what it is. In Linux, there's many different desktop environments. There's Cinnamon, there's KDE, there's Xfce, there's Mate. There's many different types of user interfaces and desktop environments. And with distros of Linux, they are interchangeable. It's merely an application like any other application, which can be changed and altered, and you could in fact have many desktop environments within a single distribution of Linux, and you can simply log into the one you want. And that is what I am going to demonstrate in this video. Before we talk about the graphical user interface, I want to review a few facts about how Linux works. As you remember, we have the Linux kernel down here at the bottom or the base of the operating system. And then we have what are called TTYs. They're based on the old teletype consoles that used to run back in the Unix era when we were using more of a mainframe terminal architecture and computing rather than today's more modern networked infrastructure. Linux is based on Unix, and the architecture shows it. So we have TTYs down here, and I show 7 on here, but there's actually more than that, sometimes up to 14. In Linux Mint 15 and up, the GUI is on TTY 8. On previous versions of Linux, as this slide shows, it's on TTY 7. With Red Hat and other distros of Linux, it could be on TTY 1. So the TTY that your Linux distro is running on is basically dependent on the distro you're running. But for the purposes of this diagram, we'll look at it as 7. In real use using Linux Mint 18, which is what we're going to be using, you would want to run TTY 8 or the alternate control F8 to get access to your TTY. Above the TTYs here, you're running your shell. This slide shows we're running the bash shell. We don't have to be running the bash shell. We could be running the Bourne shell, the C shell, the Corn shell, any other shell. But the main concept is you got your shells, in this case bash, running on the TTYs, running on the kernel. In this configuration, you can use your keyboard only. No graphical user interface, no mouse, no icons, strictly command line. The software that makes the graphical user interface possible is up here. You have your Xserver. Xserver allows you basically to use a mouse. So your mouse comes in here at Xserver. The window manager allows you to draw on the screen, and up here your desktop and display manager actually lets you have icons, have graphical user commands, folders, click, drop and drag, that sort of thing. So these three, the Xserver, the window manager, and the desktop and display manager, together they make up your graphical user interface. They sit on one of the TTYs, which varies by distribution. The TTYs sit on top of the kernel. So now we get into the meat and potatoes of what this video is going to be about. I have Linux Mint, and this is Cinnamon 18.3. That's this version 18.3, in this case with the Cinnamon desktop. And I'm about to log in. But before I log in, I want to introduce you to what's called the session button. The session button, depending on the distro, could be different places on the login screen. In this case, it's this button right here to the immediately to the right of the username, in this case tech. If we click on it, it will list all of the desktop environments we have installed. In this case, we have Cinnamon. Okay, you see Cinnamon Default, which is what we're in, and you see Cinnamon Software Rendering. That has to do with the way the drivers are configured and a few other things not important for this video. What's important is these are both Cinnamon. The Cinnamon desktop is a very full-featured, very user-friendly desktop, very much emulating Windows, takes a lot more machine resources than a much lighter weight version. So what we're going to do is we're going to change to a much lighter weight, much less resource intensive desktop environment here. So to do that, the first thing we have to do is log in, because remember, we have to update and load software, which means we have to have access to the system being logged in. So I'm going to log in here. So I feed in the password, and now it's going to log me in. So as with any virtual machine, it might take a little bit of a while, because remember, with virtualization, I'm running a guest OS on top of a host OS, and that takes additional resources. If you were running on a bare metal machine, this would be a lot quicker. This is a clean install of Linux Mint. You see the 18.3 Cinnamon 64-bit. Okay, that's the welcome screen you get. I'm going to close that down. Okay, I don't need the DVD, so I'm going to eject that. And this is basically my bare bones desktop for a Cinnamon GUI in Linux Mint 18.3. What we're going to do, we want to manage software. Remember, we're getting an application. So I click on Menu. You could type in here SOFT. Okay, and you see it right here, Software Manager. That's what we want. Okay, so we're going to click on that, and that's going to bring up our Software Manager. You give it a few minutes, and there you go. Okay, Software Manager. And what we're going to do is we're going to load what's called the Xfce desktop environment. It's a lightweight desktop environment, runs on older software, gives you all the features of Mint, but a little less smooth on the interface. So we're going to type in here in the search bar right here, we're going to type in Xfce. Okay, and you see it right here, Xfce4 meta package for the Xfce lightweight desktop environment. That's what we want. So we're going to click on that, and we see Software Manager. Like with any package, it gives you the name of the package, what it is, its rating. Okay, based on 44 reviews, it's a 4.8 out of 5 stars. That's pretty good. We see from the install button, and I hold it down, it's not currently installed. We knew that when I looked at the session button, but here it's being confirmed. You get a little preview here of what the desktop can look like, and you get reviews. So that helps you decide whether you want to really install it or not. And you could always uninstall it, like with any application. We're going to go ahead and click Install. And we wait a few minutes, and the system's going to come back to us, okay, telling us additional software has to be installed. There's 2 plugins that this desktop environment needs in order to properly run. And it's telling us that, like Linux always does. So we're going to go ahead and hit Continue. And we hit Continue. Again, it needs our sudo password. So I'm going to go type in the password for this. Okay, and you see here it's installing. So in a couple of minutes, we will have the Xfce installed and ready to go. So we give it a few minutes. Again, I'm running a virtual machine here. I'm running a virtual box. And here we go. And you see how this icon changed to remove? And when we hover over it, it says installed. It's now on our system. And we can remove it anytime simply by clicking the remove icon. And if we hover over remove, it tells us it's installed. So we're done with Software Manager. We can close it out. Note we're still in Cinnamon. Okay, we're going to be in Cinnamon until we log in to Xfce. Because when you log into Linux, the desktop environment that you're going to be using is loaded in one of what they call login scripts. So in order to change desktops, we have to log out, go to the session button, and log back in, which we're going to do right now. We come down here, we hit our menu button, we hit our logout, and we log out. Okay, and the system's going to do its thing. Okay, here it's telling us a couple of programs are still running. Okay, we're going to log out anyway. That's the computer world for you. Okay, we are back at our login screen. If we go to the session button now, okay, you notice that not only do we have the two Cinnamons that we had before, but we have this Xfce now that we did not have before. That's the one we just added and installed through the Software Manager. So what we're going to do, we're going to click on that. Okay, now we're still Linux Mint, same login screen, same user, we're still tech. The password is still the same, but when I go to log in now, you're going to notice somewhat of a different experience awaiting you. And it could be good, could be bad, depending on your point of view. Okay, you get your welcome screen like we got before. I'm going to go ahead and close that. You already know something's very different. Okay, on a first start of a new desktop, you get your first start panel where it's asking you which configuration you want to use. We're going to select and use the default. Okay, and here we are at Xfce. Doesn't this look a lot like the preview Software Manager showed us? You got your little mouse on a blue background, and you notice it's very different. It looks very different. Functionally, it's exactly the same. It's Linux Mint 18.3, but it's not Cinnamon now. It's Xfce. You got your taskbar on the bottom, you have your home, you have your application finder, your web browser, okay, your file manager, your terminal emulator. Remember, in Linux you have a terminal emulator which emulates the TTY, and you have your file. Okay, you have this disk here which we closed out, which we can close out again. We don't want to open it. You have your trash, okay, which is empty because we just logged in, your file system, and your home folder. The layout is a little different. What you get is a little bit different, but if you come up here, you have your time, your status, and most importantly, your applications. They're exactly the same. Terminal emulator, file manager, web browser, your settings. All of these are the same exact settings. Accessories, the same exact accessories. They're presented different, but underneath, they're the same. The graphics, okay, you got GIMP, you got Pix, you got Simple Scan. Same as you would in Cinnamon. You got your internet, okay, Firefox, okay, all of these are the same. Multimedia, again, okay, your Office, LibreOffice, the fantastic free, fully compatible with Microsoft Office. They're all there, okay, your system settings, everything is there, including Software Manager. We could go on here and update and load more applications, because in Linux, all you're doing is loading and running applications. Get a little tutorial here about Xfce, and of course here log out. So we see we just changed the whole user experience, the whole desktop environment, and the graphical user interface just by loading and logging in with a different desktop environment, which Linux sees is simply an application. So we could go ahead and we can log back out again. Again, the logout screen is a little different, but when we hit log out, okay, underneath, I don't know if you saw real quickly before it put this blue overlay over it, but that login screen was exactly the same. And if we wanted to, we just click the session button, and we could just click the cinnamon icon again, and if we wanted to, I'm not because I want to save some time, we could log back in cinnamon, and we'd be right back where we were before, only now we have more options. I hope you enjoyed and most importantly learned from this video.